finishes off in style. A magnificent strike into the crowd. India lift the World Cup after 28 years.
On Hotspot, it is always our endeavor to talk about topics of relevance. Last time around, we spoke about what is going on in international cricket, how it's going to be shaping up in the post-COVID world. But at the same time, we spoke about what's going on at the ICC. And in today's episode, we're going to continue a conversation regarding the relevance, topic of relevance in world cricket again. And to take this endeavor further, we have a very, very special guest all the way from down under, someone who's represented Australia in international cricket. And that's an understatement. He's played 79 test matches, 185 ODIs, and another 38 T20s, more than 12,000 international runs, 200 plus catches, and a few wickets in there as well. He had some glorious moments. You count the 195 against England at the Gabba in 2010 to a marauding 60 off 24 balls against Pakistan in the 2010 T20 World Cup semi-final. But most of all, he won the hearts of fans everywhere around the world, even earning the name Mr. Cricket. It is my honor and privilege to welcome to Hotspot for the first time, Michael Hussey. Thanks very much, Michael, for joining us here. How have you been during this tough phase of lockdown?
Yeah, g'day, Chetan, and thanks for having me on, and thank you very much for that very flattering introduction. It's good for the ego, I guess, but I'm in Perth, Western Australia. We've actually been quite fortunate here. We've managed to come through the worst of it quite well. We're able to get out and about. The kids are back at school and playing sport and things like that. We're able to get out to the shops. They're all open. And so we're quite lucky. I think Melbourne and Victoria have had a second wave. So they're just battling a little bit at the moment. But by and large, we've been quite lucky in comparison to a lot of other countries around the world.
Well, yes, it's a tough time globally. And while we are shooting this podcast, I would remind our listeners and our viewers to stay safe. Maybe pause the podcast, every 10, 12 minutes, go wash your hands, stay in and stay safe wherever you are. And immediately we'll now dive into the episode. And Mike, while I was researching, it's a good starting point because, in different parts of the world, sport has kicked off. And, when you look at England, the English Premier League has restarted. I was researching for this episode. You're a Manchester United fan. You're talking to a fellow Manchester United fan. Last weekend, Liverpool won the league for the first time in 30 odd years. How does that make you feel?
Well, obviously, I would have preferred Man U to be up there, but we can't be up there all the time. No, I'm actually happy for Liverpool. It's been a long time since they've managed to get over the line. They've been building something for a number of years now, and I think they totally deserve it. So it's good that Manchester City didn't win. I'm happy, probably more happier about that. But yeah, hopefully Manchester United will be back up there again next year.
Well, here's hoping, of course. And, from one ball game, we move directly to the other ball game, something that we've come to love. And obviously, Mike has been very close to, which is, of course, the main theme of this show, how international cricket will try and come back on its feet. And, of course, Australia plays a key role in that, not only one of the big three boards or one of the big three cricketing nations, but also you have the Indian Tour of Australia coming up. And more importantly, there's also the 2020 T20 World Cup. I think, Mike, if we need to set, a setting really for how international cricket is, or even the domestic cricket is going to shape up in Australia, we need to talk or take into consideration how the situation in Australia. You mentioned that, things are opening up in Australia. Are we closer to resumption of cricket? There's been a bit of a spike in cases in Melbourne, in Victoria. Borders have been shut. How do you see the situation developing at the moment?
Yeah, well, I guess there's an element of the unknown there to start with, because Yes, we've been able to get back on our feet here in Australia. A lot of the winter sports had to lock down for a while when I talk about rugby league and Australian rules football, but now they're back playing their games. But because of this second spike that they've had in Melbourne in particular, that's thrown a bit of confusion into it all. And we're not sure whether, the AFL in particular is going to shut down again. We're hoping it doesn't, but there's a lot of plans and contingency plans being put in place where teams are going into hubs in other states. They're having to isolate for a couple of weeks, making sure everyone's healthy and safe, and then continuing their seasons there. So it's still a fair bit of time before the cricket season starts, and a lot can change in that time. And we're hopeful that things can settle down and we can get as much cricket going in Australia once the season begins. I think if we can stay on top of things, I'm hopeful that domestic cricket will be able to get going, and that'll be a real positive. I'm really fearful about the T20 World Cup, to be honest. And the reason I am for that is that I think it would be okay to bring perhaps one team internationally over and get them isolated, get them safe, and prepare well for a series. But having to bring a number of teams, get them all into Australia, get them safe, get them isolated, and prepare them well for a tournament, and then have them move around the country, I think is going to be a logistical nightmare. And perhaps, I guess what we're hearing is perhaps the T20 World Cup might have to be postponed for maybe early next year or maybe a year down the track. So that would be a real shame. However, I can sort of understand that thinking. As far as the Indian series goes, I'm a lot more positive and confident about that going ahead. And the reason is bringing one team into Australia and getting them into a hub. I know, for example, the Adelaide Oval have just built a hotel connected to the Adelaide Oval. So the Indian team could base themselves there, train and prepare for a series and then play against Australia, hopefully. So we've all got our fingers crossed. But as we know, that this pandemic, it keeps throwing up these curveballs at us, and we need to be adaptable, and we need to be able to move quickly and have a lot of contingency plans in place. So I'm hopeful, but I've still got my fingers crossed.
Well, the situation as it is developing in international cricket right now, Mike, is you spoke about one team coming over, and it's easier to provide the bio bubble or the biosecure bubble. Something what England is doing right now with the West Indies, the first test starting on July 8. Everybody has their fingers crossed, so that we have a template really as to how international cricket can resume. Maybe club cricket and domestic cricket can follow as well. Then, of course, Pakistan come in, women's cricket again looking to resume in England as well. So it will be a bit of a template. And in a way, you have hit the points that are the main topic of contention in this episode of Hotspot. We're looking at the T20 World Cup, of course. No crowds, as you mentioned, 16-team bio environment, very, very tough to adhere to or even maintain for, say, a 3-week period. You have, of course, the qualifying tournament first, and then the main tournament. You mentioned, early next year maybe, or again in the similar window as this year in 2021. And then, of course, the good thing is that 2022 is totally empty, but there's a small discussion to be had with the BCCI because they have a T20 World Cup in 21. Small gap between two tournaments. Is that a boon right now, or do you think, because 2022 is available, we might be in a good situation?
Yeah, it's a tough one to answer, and I'm sure the administrators will be throwing around a lot of different ideas. For me personally, I don't mind having two T20 World Cups relatively close together. And the reason why I say that is it's a very exciting format of the game, and there's so many fans around the country. The teams are very good and very close, but we'll also be playing them in different parts of the world. Having one in Australia, and the style of play that is played in Australia may be a little bit different to what it's like in India. And so I think that'll throw up different challenges for the teams. It's not ideal in an ideal world. We'd love to sort of separate them a bit and have teams a chance to develop and build their team back up. But unfortunately, at this stage of the game and life as we know it at the moment is so unpredictable with this pandemic in particular. So I guess, we need to be agile and adaptable, and hopefully we can get two high quality tournaments.
Well, you've been obviously part of 2009 and 2010. They were also very closely separated, and since then the ICC decided to, have them a bit more spaced out. So hopefully in the next FTP cycle, which right now seems, a bit far off. Everything was going fine. 2021, 22, and 23 ODI World Cup. Now everything just seems so very, very far off. Cricket Australia have been rather busy. It was, a lot of news coming out of Cricket Australia. A lot of people have been furloughed, laid off. CEO Kevin Roberts, he's not had a good time. They've had to look for a new CEO, had some financial woes as well. Were you surprised as an ex-player and somebody who's so closely attached to the Cricket Australia community? Were you surprised? Because a lot of people here in India were surprised that, okay, this is right now where Cricket Australia is at. Were you surprised at all?
I was very surprised, and so were many people here in Australia, just how reactive they were. And I was just surprised at how quickly they reacted. I feel as though we got through 95, 99% of our cricket season here in Australia, and we were meant to be on a break anyway. So I felt personally that Cricket Australia had an opportunity just to sit back, wait to see what happened. We'd already seen that the situation had changed so much in the matter of 3 months. We still had another 5 months before the cricket season was meant to begin. So a lot can change for the good and the bad. I was, surprised and a bit disappointed, really, that Cricket Australia had such a knee-jerk reaction, laying off so many of the staff that worked so hard for Cricket Australia, a lot of the coaches, and as well. And I think they've lost a bit of trust, really, in the community with those staff. And if they want to bring them back in the future, I think they might have a few issues there. So I do understand, though, that it is an opportunity to have a look at the game in Australia and all of the programs and structures that they've got in place and review them and see if they've got a bit fat, I guess, and whether that can be just sort of trimmed back a little bit to make sure that they're not sort of spending money that they don't need to spend, I guess, or is just not as valuable. It gives boards an opportunity to go back and think, okay, well, what's really important in a cricket organisation, and let's put our money into that. So I feel as though that there was an opportunity to do that, and they have done that, but they've been extremely brutal. I must admit, and I think it's going to take a bit of time for them to gain that trust back from the cricketing community.
Well, it's brutal times all over world cricket at the moment, and money has got to do with a lot of it, really. I mean, you look at ECB; they're trying to save their international season, and I'm referring again and again to them because the fact that they are going ahead with international cricket at such a time, trying to resume international cricket, it is obviously dictated by broadcast rights and how much money can come in. And when money comes in through international cricket, perhaps it also percolates down to the lower leagues, domestic club cricket, and perhaps that is how you can save domestic structure and club cricket. It's different to, say football, where the domestic leagues like Premier League and everything, La Liga, they start out and then you move on to the international level. And of course, when we're talking money, again, you have to talk about those two possible major events in the Australian summer. Of course, the T20 World Cup, which you have mentioned, looks a little improbable at the time. And Cricket Australia would earn around 70 to 80 million USD from our estimates from that tournament, and most of which would percolate down to the various, host associations, which obviously is a good thing. But also, when you look at India's tour of Australia, that's a 300 million USD lottery. It's a jackpot, really. And of course, a lot of that money will percolate down the system as well. But here, 70 to 80 and 300 million, if you had to pick one, really, I don't think there's any question or any doubt here.
Yeah, you're exactly right. And that Cricket Australia have been planning for worst case scenario, and that's why they've followed all these the staff and looked to cut back a lot of the programs, because in the event of a T20 World Cup and the Indian series not being able to go ahead, this is what Cricket Australia banked their whole 4-year financial cycle on, is an Indian series, because
Right.
that's where they make all their money. So they'll be putting a lot of time and effort and energy and talking to the government to make sure that Indian series goes ahead. That's the big one for them. But you're right. I really feel for say the ECB. It's in their cricket season, the time where they've got to make the most of their commercial opportunities and make the most of their money. And that they've had to react very quickly to what's happening around the world. I think Cricket Australia are in the very fortunate position that got through our season. We've got an opportunity, hopefully, that we can ride this out and not be too much affected. But having said that, as I said earlier, I think it is an opportunity to focus on what's important. And what Cricket Australia have done is that they've cut out a lot of the programs that surround, that they're focusing their attention on the main Australian teams, the state cricket, and Premier Cricket, or the club cricket down below, and a lot of the other programs in the middle, like under 15s, under 17s, second 11 cricket has been taken out of the programs to try and save a lot of money. It'll be interesting to see what the academy program looks like as well moving forward. So they have had a very close look and focusing on what they think is very, very important in a cricket program.
Again and again, I'm going back to the ECB reference, because we've talked about percolating it down towards a structure. Now we have seen that with ECB, with now cricket looking to start up a bit, they're looking at club cricket and domestic cricket to start up as well. You mentioned that it's a little far off in Australia, but we had international series against Zimbabwe, West Indies. India was supposed to play T20s before the T20 World Cup. You had August and September penciled in for those international series, perhaps in the northern parts of Australia. Those are the wintry cricket venues. The Zimbabwe series has just been postponed. Do you think at all that at any particular stage, what exactly might be the date where cricket in general, whether it's club cricket, domestic cricket, where would we see cricket as a starting point in Australia?
Well, in actual fact, we've already had one tournament up in Darwin, in the northern part of Australia. They've managed to get a tournament away, a T20 tournament, and everyone was watching that pretty closely to see, if it could go through unscathed, and I believe it went off pretty well. So that's exciting for the future. I think it's very difficult for anyone to give an exact date because we just don't know what's going to happen. We don't know if there's going to be a second wave, or we're going to be able to keep it under control. If we can keep it under control, best case scenario, then I'd be confident that club cricket would pretty much start at the start of our season, which is generally around October. And so if that's the case, then that'd be fantastic. We're back. The kids are back playing sport here in Western Australia now. They're playing their football and rugby and things like that, and school football. So I would hope that that would continue on. Now, that this is in Western Australia. I believe in Melbourne and Victoria, that they're not so sure because of their second wave they've had. That they've had to postpone the start of their football season. So I just think there's still so much time to play out. We've got a number of months before our next sort of cricket season is about to begin, and so we just need to wait and see, ride it out, and just hope with fingers crossed that we can contain this thing and then we can get back to playing cricket. But I think it'd be a brave man, I guess, to say, yeah, we'll definitely be able to start at this time because, as I said earlier, we need to be agile and move with what's happening in the environment at the time.
Well, it was great news that you're talking about the club cricket competition in Darwin really going off without a hitch. And, with international borders closed, I think it becomes really, really important that, the domestic structure takes off. And if you're having a tournament in a biosecure bubble, things stay the same. You don't have, of course, the ICC has come on with regulations now that if at least international cricket, and I'm sure in domestic structure, whether it's, the leagues or the club cricket structure, we will have the same where it's almost like concussion, but it's not really because yes, in concussion, you have a player injured and you replace him. That's a good rule. That's a good substitute rule. But if somebody tests positive or somebody shows symptoms and you try and dissociate him from the team, this is the ICC change that you can replace a player. Does it really work? Will it really work? Because, this pandemic is such that if somebody has symptoms, you have to isolate them and then you have to test others one for one here. Does it work? Will it work?
Well, first of all, I'd say I think they're trying to do the right thing,
yes.
The ICC, by bringing in these measures. And if someone is not well or showing some symptoms, they've got to get away from the group whatsoever. But as you say, if they test positive to COVID-19 because of how how contagious this virus is, you'd think that if one person in the team has got it, with how close everyone is in proximity, it's going to be probably passed on to a number of people in the team. And what are you going to do? You're going to have to try and replace 5, 6, 7 members of the team. It's going to be very difficult. So I personally think it's going to be tough. If someone does test positive to it, I think the game's probably going to have to get called almost immediately off. And the teams are going to have to separate and get isolated as quickly as possible. Because at the end of the day, the health and safety is the paramount thing. That's the most important thing. Cricket, as much as we love it, and it's so important to all of us, is a secondary thing in all of this. Health and safety is the number one thing. We don't want to be passing this virus on to our parents, our grandparents, our young children, and endangering their lives. So yeah, I think every necessary precaution needs to be taken place.
Yeah, and that's the thing about this, glorified flu, as people call it, because it's not just about us; it's also about the people around us, our parents, our kids, friends, anybody really. It's not just about our safety, but everybody's safety. So wear a mask whenever you, and this is to all the listeners and viewers, wear a mask when you go out. It's absolutely imperative and cuts down the risk of getting affected by this pandemic. The other unknown, Mike, if and when cricket does resume, is the lack of saliva on the ball. And this topic has generated quite a bit of heat because, after a long time in Test cricket, perhaps we're coming into an era where the bowlers, especially the fast bowlers, were trying to do something good. Opening batsmen not really averaging too high. Yes, you have the likes of Steve Smith and Virat Kohli and Kane Williamson and Joe Root, but the top orders, especially when a team is traveling overseas, they're finding it tough. They're finding it hard. But now with the lack of saliva ban and once the hardness of the ball goes away, do you fear that this could, tilt the balance back in the favor of batsmen? Is it becoming even more batsman friendly if the bowlers or the fielding team can't really work on the ball without saliva and bring that vital element of reverse swing into the game?
Well, first of all, I would say that's going to be a hard habit to break. As players, we've been brought up from, when we were very young, to use the saliva on the ball. So you do it without even thinking. It's just second nature to you. So it's going to be difficult to stop doing that. Obviously, we're going to have to be aware. Thankfully, the players can still use their sweat. Now, I know there are some places around the world, say New Zealand or England, where it is a bit cooler. But generally, you have some players in the team that do sweat quite a lot. So hopefully the players can still use that to their advantage and to shine the ball. Because I agree, we want to see a great contest between bat and ball. That's what the game's all about. We don't want to tip too far in favour of the bowlers or the batters. We love a great contest. For me personally, for all the talk about the ball and saliva and all that sort of stuff, that's all fine. But for me, the pitches are the most important thing. And that's where we need to pay most attention to. If you can get a pitch that encourages good pace and bounce or has a bit of grass on it and, it helps the bowlers with a bit of extra swing or seam movement. If you go to India, enticing turn and spin and things like that, then that creates a great contest between bat and ball as well. So for me personally, one of the criticisms I've had here in Australia, we've had these drop-in pitches in Australia now, and they've become very much the same. Pretty flat. They don't do much for the bowlers. They're not fast and bouncy. And it really didn't create a good contest. So the pitches, I think, are the most important thing to get right. I think the groundsmen are getting better and better at working with those drop-in pitches. I think at Adelaide now has excellent pace and bounce. And as the game wears on, it can take some spin as well. Even the MCG, which was really criticised heavily in the last few years, has started working a lot harder on that pitch and leaving more grass on it and experimenting with that pitch to again, create a better contest between bat and ball. So I think the pitch, rather than the ball, plays a huge role in all of this.
Very interesting point there, Mike. And just to add a question there, like you said, the pitch plays a really important role. I remember Ravichandran Ashwin after the Edgbaston Test in 2018 on the tour of England. He also made a point in terms of the ball. I'm bringing the ball in back here again because, yes, as important as the pitch, but we use different balls in the test format or in any format, really. You have the Kookaburra, you have the SG ball, you have the Duke's ball. In ODIs and T20s, you still have a standard. You use the Kookaburra. But in Test cricket, you use different balls in different parts of the world. He said, Ashwin, he said that, maybe the Duke's ball should be consistently used in Test cricket in every part of the world. I know that in Australia, they were trying to get Duke's ball into the domestic league. And just last evening, I read a news on Twitter that that experiment has been scrapped. What do you think, really? Should the Duke's ball be made mandatorily consistent across the Test format? Because it does a little more throughout, as long as it stays hard and the seam stays prominent.
Yeah, don't necessarily agree with that.
Okay.
And the reason why I say that is we have experimented with using the Duke's ball for half the Sheffield Shield season. So half the season is Kookaburra ball, half the season is the Duke's ball. And that was to help our players learn to play the swinging ball. So when we went to England, we'd be able to adapt, hopefully a little bit better. And I think it's had some success, to be honest. I think it's been a good initiative, and players have to change their games and adapt from the start of the season, when it's the Kookaburra ball, to the back end of the season when they use the Dukes. However, my only concern is if you go just to the Duke balls, are we creating an environment where we're just going to be encouraging slower, medium-pace bowlers that can really swing the ball, and discouraging captains and the use of spinners moving forward, because the ball is going to swing a lot, and also the extreme pace bowlers, where you just need to run in and bowl as fast as you can, and are we discouraging those guys? I think with the Duke's ball, it certainly does favour the guys that are very skilled, that can get the ball in the right area, perhaps not as quick, but they can swing the ball around in all directions. And I don't want the game just to be for one type of player. That's what I think I love about the game of cricket, is we encourage different types of players: spinners, medium pace bowlers in the right conditions, fast bowlers with extreme pace and bounce, at certain stages. If the pitch is flat and the ball's not doing anything, having that bowler with extreme pace can be really effective. So I don't want it just to be just the Duke ball for that reason. I like the different types of balls, and I loved it as a batsman, having to adapt to different conditions from wherever you played around the world. You come to India, you're going to have to deal with spin and, lots of spin bowlers bowling. You go to England and the ball's going to swing and seam around a bit. It might not be the extreme pace. You come to Australia and the guys with extreme pace and bounce and you need to adapt to that. And so that's what I love about the game, having to adapt your game to different parts of the world. And I don't want it to just encourage one type of bowler.
Well, that's very interesting there. A lot of discussion about a lot of factors which will govern international cricket. I'll just pick up on the one sentence you mentioned there. When you come to Australia, a lot of fast bowlers going hard and fast on those bouncy pitches. India, hopefully, will be able to tour Australia later this year. I can't move on from international cricket without just, talking about it. India won 2-1 last time around, but, Steve Smith, David Warner, they're back. Manas Labuschagne, he's really blossomed into a fantastic test player. This is going to be a different contest, isn't it?
Oh, without doubt. I'm salivating already at the prospect of this series, because India were sensational last time they came to Australian shores, and it was great to see them win. And it gave them so much belief that they could win in Australian conditions. However, I think you're right. This is going to be a different series. Obviously, throwing back in Warner and Smith into that team automatically makes Australia a much better team to start with. So the Indian bowlers are going to have to work harder, no question. But although it was such a terrible situation that Warner and Smith and Bancroft had to go through with the sandpaper saga, what that did do in that year period was expose some guys to Test cricket that couldn't get an opportunity previously. And you talk of Manas Labuschagne, you talk of, say, Travis Head, Matthew Wade was able to get back into the team. And it's given them an opportunity to play a number of Test matches there and believe that they can, be good enough and grow into playing, because it's not easy just coming into Test cricket and dominating. So it's been able to hopefully build the depth of the Australian team as well. And so I think the Australian team coming into this next series against India will be far stronger. Obviously, Smith and Warner, as I've mentioned, world-class bowling attack with the likes of Cummins, Stark, Hazelwood, James Pattinson as well, Nathan Lyon, we've got a world-class spinner there. Plus those other guys that I was talking about now having more experience at the level will really make the team a very well-rounded team. So I think India are going to have to be at their best if they're going to knock Australia off this time.
Yeah, and this time Australia, in all probability, will be the number one, test side, and when this series happens. So the tables have really turned. India have a fantastic bowling attack at this time, and of course, their batting is packing up punch. So lots of factors, lot of variables, and we're really, really hoping that series goes ahead. Interesting chat on international cricket, all aspects of international cricket. We quickly move on to the shorter format, with which, of course, you're still very, very closely attached, especially as part of the coaching staff at one of the most prominent T20 sides, the Chennai Super Kings. We're looking at, at a shortened IPL window. You're looking at September, October. That's what the talk is. If obviously the T20 World Cup doesn't go ahead, this has been a forced sabbatical for everyone. Everyone would have been busy watching, and obviously from your point, being part of the IPL. How does the shortened tournament, or how has this lack of action affected the IPL franchisees, the teams, the players? You obviously have been in touch with them. And how will strategies and preparations change if you're having a shortened window, if you're playing whether in India or in the UAE, as the conversation has now started for the IPL 2020 IPL?
Yeah, it's a good question, and I'm not sure I've got all the answers at this stage. Yeah, it's going to be difficult and challenging, but I guess the good thing is it's a level playing field. Everyone's in the same boat. And so it will be the team that can adapt quickly enough to wherever it is in the world, whether it's in India or perhaps the UAE, or I don't know. Need to adapt to the conditions very quickly, and we'll need to, I guess, get our plans and our preparation very, very sharp and switched on. I guess from a Chennai Super Kings point of view, one of the advantages perhaps we will have, and I'm not saying it definitely will be, is that we've got a very experienced squad. Players that know their own game extremely well, players that have probably played all around the world and are used to adapting to different conditions, and hopefully that will hold us in good stead. We've had a very consistent team also for a number of years now, so players will know their roles. And will be able to get into the preparation knowing their roles very quickly. So I'm hoping that holds us in good stead. However, there's still so many unknowns there, and everyone's going to have to think quickly and adapt very quickly to whatever the conditions present to us.
I'm again going to latch on to one of the sentences you used. There are a lot of experienced players, who know their roles. It also not just experience; it also has to do a bit with age. And over the last couple of years, everybody was surprised as CSK went about reforming and re-strategizing their unit. Like you mentioned, a lot of players who know their roles, but also know their experience. On the higher side, on the plus side, 30 plus. What has been the thinking there? What is the strategies there? Because a lot of people were surprised with that, with the way, CSK, ever since they came back into the fold, the direction they've taken. Can you just highlight this for us? Can you just underline? Because again, it has had no impact, because that has actually helped CSK, because like you mentioned, everybody knows their role. So there's this clarity of thought, clarity of action. What is the thinking behind this particular strategy?
Yeah, well, it's an interesting one. I'm actually not part of the list management side of things, but I think we have identified that experience can be a bit underrated in T20 cricket. I know when we first started playing it, everyone thought, well, it's going to be for the young man or woman. It's going to be exciting. You need to be agile. You need to be athletic. But what we've sort of found is that experience plays a big role, because in T20 cricket, it's a highly pressurised game, and you need to be thinking clearly and making good decisions under enormous pressure. And players that have experience, that have been in every pressure situation around, generally make better decisions. Plus, because it's only a 20-over game, the longevity of the older bodies can probably get through a little bit better. And look, we might give a few runs away in the field, but we feel as though we can make that up with the experience of batsmen and bowlers making good decisions and executing under pressure. And so it's been a strategy that certainly worked for us. And yeah, it's going to be very interesting, though, to see what the team and the squad looks like moving forward after this sort of 3-year I guess, rotation, or whatever
cycle,
auction,
yeah.
sort of cycle. Yes, it'll be very interesting to see the direction of the team going forward. I'm not sure what it's going to look like, but as you mentioned, we've got a lot of players that are probably at the back end of their career. Will they be able to go around again? I'm not really sure. But it's going to be very interesting and fascinating to see the next phase of CSK, because it might look, it might look a lot different. I'm not exactly sure.
You know what, a lot of CSK fans and a lot of Indian cricket fans are, afraid of that the new version or the new look of CSK might not include, a particular MS Dhoni. There's no question on the IPL, or no questionnaire on the IPL which is complete without a mention of MS Dhoni. The common consensus last year when India bowed out of the World Cup, ODI World Cup at the semi-final stage was, and especially after he took a lot of rest and he was away from international cricket, a lot of people thought, and that's ex-selectors, current selectors, ex-cricketers, even the Indian support staff, that he would play the 2020 IPL, and then we will see how it goes for him as regards the 2020 T20 World Cup. That's all gone to dust now. I just have to get your opinion on this. Will we ever see MS Dhoni again? We're definitely going to see him again in the yellow of CSK, and hopefully for the next couple seasons or the next couple IPL tournaments. But will we ever see him again in blue?
Well, I don't know because I'm obviously not an Indian selector, but I don't think you can discount him. You should never write off champions and champion players. He's obviously given so much to the country and as a leader. And he still keeps himself in very good shape. So as long as he's fit and healthy, and maybe the break would do him the world of good, just to really become fresh, have a chance to work on the physical fitness side of things. As I mentioned, because he's got so much experience, it will take a little bit of time to get the skills back up to the level that they need to be, but not as long as perhaps other players that don't know their game so well. He's got a great understanding of the game and his own game. So I wouldn't be worried from a skill perspective. The only question, it's up to MSD really. He's the one in his own mind, whether he's willing to continue to be physically and mentally fully engaged in trying to play at the top level, then I have no doubt he could still do it. But what I would say is, and I can only talk from personal experience, once you get to a certain stage, it's more a mental thing. You think, well, I don't know if I want to, put myself through that mental and physical anguish that you have to go through as an international player. So you get to a stage where, you've just had enough of doing it mentally. Now, as I said, maybe this break, complete forced break for MSD, will give him an opportunity to mentally refresh and get that hunger, to want to do it again. So I'm certainly not writing him off, no question whatsoever. But it's up to him. It's in his mind and in his heart whether he still wants to do it.
Well, we'll as avid MSD fans, and I'm sure you are as well, as everybody will be hoping to see him once again in blue. But if not in blue, then yes, we'll take a couple more seasons of yellow at least. Before moving on to the last segment of our show on this episode of Hotspot, I have to ask. You mentioned the experience bit in T20 cricket. It's really crucial. You've played a lot of T20 cricket, part of the international side, and again as the IPL. How have you seen T20 cricket evolve, the format evolve, not only from a vantage point of view, but also as a player? Experience a lot more vital today. And you mentioned about fitness. You mentioned about having that struggle of keeping up with the game. Do you think T20 cricket today is totally different from, say, when you were doing those miracles in 2010?
Oh, I think the game has changed a lot and changed for the better. I must admit, I remember the first couple of seasons of the IPL. It was all the Bollywood glitz and glamour, and there was the after parties, and the cricket was, I think it was almost secondary, in a lot of ways. It was about the entertainment surrounding the game. But I can assure you now that the game is the first and foremost priority. And there's a lot of analysis goes into it. There's a lot of good hard training, that the players are becoming very specialised in the roles that they play as well. We've seen mystery spinners burst onto the scene, which I think has made had a huge impact. I think that was another one of the misconceptions when T20 started, was it was going to be the death of the spinner. But I think we'll probably find that spinners are dominating the game now, and it's fantastic to see. I think the power players are really starting to hone their skills now. and get better and better. I think when I first started playing, there was certainly the power players out there, but they weren't as consistent as they were today. And I think of an Andre Russell type player. When he first started many years ago, say 10 or 15 years ago in T20 cricket, he might come off, 1 in 5, 1 in 6 times. Now he's coming off just about every second game. So the consistency of the power players is just incredible. I still do believe, though, that there's a place for the guys that can do the basic games well and have a good foundation to their game. I think of someone like a Virat Kohli or a Rohit Sharma, for example. They've got excellent sound foundations to their game, and they can adapt to the different formats of the game and adapt to the situations of different games as well. So I still think there's a place for that, but I do honestly believe it's a game of execution under pressure. If you can execute your skills under that enormous pressure, whether it be as that mystery spinner, whether it be as the death bowler, whether that be as a batsman, batting at the top or in the middle order, or batting at the end as that power player, it just comes down to can you execute that skill, and that's where the game is still very much the same. It was the same when we first started playing T20 cricket. The guys that could execute their skills under pressure were the best in the world. And I think of, say, a Malinga, or I think of a Narayan. And now it's exactly the same. Is it Andre Russell, executing his skill under pressure? Rashid Khan, Virat Kohli with the bat. So, there's a lot of similarities, but I think the game has got better, that the players have got better at executing those skills.
Right. And, talking about executing under pressure, we're moving to the final segment of this episode. It's called the moving finger. I know from a fact, Mike, that you were, educating yourself to be a science teacher before cricket happened. So I'm assuming that you've seen Big Bang Theory. You're a Sheldon Cooper fan. So the moving finger actually is a takeaway from Sheldon Cooper, putting even more spotlight on our guest.
The moving finger writes, and having writ moves on.
Talking about execution under pressure, we have a question from one of your fans on Twitter, Subrabrata Majumdar. He wants to ask you, which is the first question of this fun segment, when you had to score that 18 of 6 of Saeed Ajmal, one of the top spinners in international game, what was going through your head? What were you thinking? How did you line him up, hitting those magnificent sixes over long on? So can you just take us through that?
Sure. Well, I guess a bit of luck involved, because I must admit I hated facing Ajmal. He was an unbelievable bowler. I had a lot of trouble with him. He got me out on many occasions. And the stars just seemed to align that day. We'd pretty much given up hope, actually, of winning the game. I think we needed 50 off the last 3 overs, and we managed to get it down to 18 off the last. But the thing that was in our favour was that it was a very short boundary on the left-hander's leg side and an extremely strong wind going that way as well. So my only thinking was, well, if I can just get the ball up into the air, maybe the wind will carry it over the boundary. And it was just one of those lucky days in your life where it doesn't happen very often, but it just managed to come off. And I couldn't believe it myself. I thought I was in a dream. I was pinching myself and hoping that I wasn't going to wake up. But I was just lucky that day, my lucky day. And maybe it was payback for all the times that Ajmal got me out and made me look silly throughout his career, because he was a wonderful bowler.
Well, that's a bit overstating things. I'm sure champions always attribute luck when they pull off such miraculous knocks. I mean, everybody watching was so enthralled. The second question, and I promised you, Deep is involved in this. Deep Dasgupta wants to, who he wasn't able to join us today, but he really wants to ask you that you've played under Ricky Ponting and Michael Clarke in international cricket. You've played with MSD and with Rohit Sharma, a short span at Mumbai Indians. Different styles of captaincy. 4 very different individuals. What sort of captaincy, what style of captaincy as a player were you, preferable to or more amenable to? Which one did you prefer? Which one do you, if you have to, if you're coaching someone and say, okay, you're a future captain, obviously MSD is one of the great all-time captains, but all 4 have really done well for their respective sides. Which is the style of captaincy you would attribute to?
Yeah, it's a good question. I loved them all, to be honest. They're all, but they were all, as you say, very different. And, you know, Ricky Ponting, he was someone that he was so competitive and led from the front, and he backed his players 100%. And, you know, he was very competitive guy and just wanted to win so bad, and just dragged the whole team along with him. I would say Michael Clarke was very tactical, you know, very, very good cricket brain out on the field, and knew when to bowl certain bowlers and things like that. MSD, obviously, he's got a great intuition for the game, but he's also very calm, very cool. He backs his players enormously, shows a lot of faith in them. And Rohit, I felt as though much the same. He was very, very calm and under pressure, tactically very sound as well. But just had this great ability to take pressure off players. And I think that was a good thing. But what I would say about, you know, able to learn off all those leaders, the thing that comes through to me is that the great leaders, they have certain attributes, I guess. And one of those attributes that stands out to me is that they're consistent characters. So whether the team's going really well or going poorly, that they're just consistent, you know, and calm with their personalities. So, you know, with Ricky, for example, I didn't know whether he'd scored 100 or he'd scored a duck. You know, he'd just be the same person. MSD, if we'd lost 4 games in a row or won 4 games in a row, he was exactly the same person. And I think that's a really good attribute to have from a leadership point of view. And that rubs off on everyone else in the team. You know, if you've got these emotional captains going up and down, then everyone gets a little bit tense and nervous and rides those waves with the captain. But if you've got a captain that's in control, calm, and consistent with their personality, I think it really does help the rest of the team.
Well, that's an interesting point. Really great point in terms of leadership skills, and perhaps our listeners and our viewers can look at captaincy from a different vantage point. You know, people on the outside don't always get that inside the head scenario when you're looking from a captaincy, because cricket captaincy can be a bit jarring, you know, bit of a jarring job, especially when you have 1 billion people. Not sure Australian captains have had that sort of a pressure, but when there's an Indian captain there, it's a totally different pressure. And, you know, somebody really needs, like MSD, having those nerves of steel, that icy cool demeanor. And that's a very interesting point coming from someone who's played so much with MSD. And this is regarding the homework. Now I'm moving on, and this is regarding the homework that I gave you to pick an IPL 11 that you wouldn't want to face. And for the benefit of our listeners and viewers, standard rules apply. You're only allowed to pick 4 international players. Go.
Oh yes, I'm just looking at my list here now. I
Yeah.
might be in trouble here because I think I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 overseas players. So I'm in trouble here. I might need some help. I missed that bit on the homework.
Okay.
Okay. I'm going to go at the top of the order.
Yeah.
I think Rohit Sharma's got to be up there. He's unbelievable player and has been for a long time. And opening with him, I've got David Warner. I've got Virat Kohli at number 3. And I've got AB de Villiers at number 4 with MSD at number 5. Now, I was tossing up at number 6 between Hardik Pandya and Kieran Pollard, but we're going to have to get rid of Pollard now because we can't have too many overseas players. So I'm going to go Hardik Pandya. Okay, now this is where I can perhaps get a little bit creative because I had Andre Russell at 7. So I might need your help. Who can be someone else that can maybe put some pressure? And Rashid Khan at number 8.
Absolutely.
Let me just go through my 11 to start with, and then we might have to try and sub out a couple of players and bring in some Indians, you know, with some help. So Rohit and Warner opening, Kohli at 3, AB de Villiers 4, MSD at 5, Hardik Pandya 6, Russell 7, Rashid Khan 8. I had Sunil Narine at 9, either Mitchell Stark or Malinga at 10, and Bumrah at number 11. So I've got too many overseas players there. I need to sub out. So let me have a think. Who
you can put in Bhuvneshwar Kumar or Yuzvendra Chahal as one of the spinners. So you could you could get rid of I don't want to say this, but yeah.
Narine.
Okay.
let's get rid of Narine and we'll bring in Chahal there, definitely.
Okay.
Okay.
And you need a power hitter.
Batting option?
Yeah, you need a power
Yeah.
hitter. You said you wanted a power hitter, but Indian cricket for me personally has struggled with finding a power hitter in the lower order, and somebody like Hardik Pandya usually does that job. And you
Yeah.
already have Hardik Pandya.
I've got Hardik Pandya there, but but I've got MSD as a pretty handy power hitter there as well.
How about Manish
But
Pandey? Because he's been very consistent in the middle order for a lot of IPL sides.
yeah, he's definitely up there. If I'm going to go for another Indian batsman, I'm probably leaning more towards like a KL Rahul or something like that.
He's in stupendous white ball form, and off late he's really changed his game to suit the demands of ODI and T20 cricket, and now doing a fantastic job for India with the gloves as well. Which of
Yeah,
course you wouldn't need to
yeah,
bother
definitely.
with MSD there.
That's right. But to us, where to put him in the order, that's the problem. So, so this is, yeah, it's tricky, isn't it? I like the idea of Bhuvaneshwar Kumar. I definitely like him in the team. Yeah, he's a brilliantly skilled bowler, good death bowler. So maybe he can take that number 10 place off Mitchell Stark.
Yep.
I'd love to have Starkey in there, but yeah, Bhuvi can certainly bowl at the death as well. Cool and calm under pressure. So we've managed. So I think that pretty much covers me, doesn't it?
Yeah, it does. I mean, you've got the four, you've got the four foreign players: Warner, AB, and of course you have Andre Russell. So that takes care of your power hitting, and Rashid Khan, which is brings in the mystery spin element. So do you want to state your not all time, but a fearsome, I would say a fearsome IPL 11 that you wouldn't want to face? So do you want to, list out the entire playing 11 now that we have got the homework right this time?
All right. Okay. So let's go for Rohit Sharma and David Warner at the top of the order. Virat Kohli at number 3. AB de Villiers at 4. MS Dhoni at 5. Hardik Pandya at 6. And Andre Russell at 7. Rashid Khan at 8. Chahal at 9. Bhuvaneshwar Kumar at 10 and Bumrah at number 11. Let's put KL Rahul at the 12th man.
Right, absolutely. So there we go. Full marks to Michael Hussey, as always, getting to the point. And yeah, maybe missed a bit of a brief on that homework, but I'm sure it was it was fun for him to get to. Which brings me to the last question of this episode. Like I'd mentioned, you wanted to be a science teacher at, once upon a time. You studied to be a science teacher. How did cricket happen? It happened, the international arena we know came late, but you were tremendous in first class cricket. How did cricket happen? I'm sure David Hussey having another international cricketer at home, it got competitive at home. So can you just take us through that childhood?
Well, put it this way, Chetan. I wish I could say my motives for being a teacher were pure, but I loved cricket and I wanted to play cricket, but my parents were very supportive of me following my cricket dream, but they said, you must still also follow your studies. And so I decided when I got to the end of high school that I was going to study at university to become a science and maths teacher. And the reason behind that was that school here in Australia finishes at 3 o'clock, so I could then get off to cricket training. And we have great school holidays over the summer period. So I wouldn't have to be teaching at that stage and I could go and play lots of cricket. So I thought it was a vocation that would certainly help my cricket career. And it wasn't necessarily me wanting to become the science and maths teacher to bring on the next mathematicians and scientists here in Australia. It was more because I wanted to free up as much time as I could to go and play cricket.
Well, now you can help, you're helping the Australian society. You can help bring on the next Ricky Ponting, Shane Warne, and of course, the next Mike Hussey for Australian cricket as well. Just a final question, and I have to ask this. You don't like the Mr.Cricket tag, or that's what I read somewhere. What's the story there? And I really have to ask this. What's the story there?
Well, firstly, I don't mind it. I mean, like I could be called a lot worse things. So, it's a bit flattering. I'm just not sure I deserve it because there's so many more greater players than me out there. And there's so many people that know a lot more about the game than me out there. You're probably one of them.
Oh, that's heavy praise.
So, I just don't think I deserve it, but I do love the game very much. And where it started, it started when I was playing county cricket in England. I was playing for Durham and we were playing against Lancashire at Old Trafford. And Freddie Flintoff was playing there and Brad Hodge was the overseas professional there. And it was one of those cold and drizzly, miserable days that, you know, no one really wanted to be out there. Everyone was all rugged up, but I was in the middle batting and I was loving it. You know, I was charging between the wickets. I was calling loud. I was diving into my crease, and, you know, I was really engaged in the game as always. And Freddie Flintoff, he turned to Brad Hodge and he said, this guy must be Mr. Cricket. He loves cricket more than anyone I've ever seen in my life. And Brad Hodge found that quite funny. He brought that back to Australia, and I think he told a few of the guys, and they never let me forget it. So that's my understanding of how it started, and it sort of stuck from there. But yeah, as I said, I could be called a lot worse things.
Well, you know, this is one of the reasons why everybody loves you so much, when you say that, you know, not only you could be called a lot of other worse things, but it's something that you perhaps don't deserve in our eyes as fans, as people who've you know, grown up seeing you play and, you know, followed your career and have the privilege of now talking to you. I can absolutely say and vouch for it that you absolutely deserve that name. Right, that brings us, that was a lot of fun talking to Mike Hussey. It brings us to the end of this very, very special episode of Hotspot. Mike, our sincere thanks and gratitude for you to take out so much of your time and for coming on this show and giving us your thoughts on every topic, and of course, doing your homework in the great spirit as well. Thank you so much.
Good on you, Chetan. Thanks very much for having me on. And I just wanted to send a message to all the Indian fans out there. Stay safe, stay healthy, and let's hope we can all get through this together and get back to doing what we love most, and that's watching and playing cricket. So yeah, hopefully we can all see you soon.
Right, that brings us to the end of this episode of Hotspot. We'll be back again with another episode looking at another topic of relevance in these times of global strife. In the meantime, do leave us your feedback and comments and share this episode, the first video episode, in fact, of Hotspot on social media. Reach out to us. We are now on Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Spotify, TuneIn. And with this episode, like I said, the first video episode, we are now on YouTube as well. So you can subscribe to the podcast feed on all these avenues. Until next time then, stay safe and goodbye.
Dhoni finishes off in style. A magnificent strike into the crowd. India lift the World Cup after 28 years.